Hey everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of the LinkedIn Live video series, Breaking New Ground. I'm Sajeesh, and I'm a part of the marketing team here at MoEngage. Before we get started, I would just like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So the first one is that you can follow this chat on Breaking New Ground, and you can also use the same hashtag to also follow the future episodes. And also, if you have any questions during the course of the session, you can drop them in the comments, and we'll try to take as many comments as possible in the end. Now, I have with me Abhilash. Hey, Abhilash.
Hey Sajeesh, excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So Abhilash is a part of the customer success team here at MoEngage, and he takes care of digital businesses in the Southeast Asia region. So when I need to know what's happening in that area and what are some of the trends, Abhilash, who I walk up to get a sense of Southeast Asia. So lately, not as much walking up to as just pinging, but yeah, still virtually, physically, he's my go-to person for anything customer success and anything Southeast Asia. So today we'll be talking about a few consumer-centric businesses and how they are changing the way they engage their customers. So, just to start off, we know that there are a few changes that consumer businesses are bringing about in their strategy and in how they focus on customer engagement. Uh, Most of the change has been brought about by change in consumer trends, right? There are other ancillary factors as well, like government regulations and ban on travel and things like that. But on a high level, Abhilash, what are some of the changes in trends based on consumer behavior that you've been observing?
Sure, Sajeesh. So because of COVID, there's been a fundamental change in all businesses out there. So what I've noticed personally is that there's been an uptick in number of people signing up on e-commerce and grocery platforms. Also, gaming is an industry that's gaining steam. In terms of industries that currently are facing the brunt of COVID, I think it's the hospitality and the travel sector. So, what's happening right now is that a lot of users are coming online for the first time in tier two and tier three cities because of the lockdowns. Now, this is creating a high level of engagement on the apps itself. Like people aren't exactly transacting, but they're engaging and browsing through the app. And many of these users eventually are going to go ahead and place their first orders once the lockdown eases up. And then there's a high potential for businesses to capitalize on this to make sure that they're able to engage and get these users to become their loyal users. So that's a general trend that I've been observing. Have you noticed interesting trends as well from your observations?
Sure. Closer to home here in India, one of the things that's picking up really is grocery deliveries. Right now, it's not a new trend, so to speak. There have always been players like Big Basket and Grofers who've been in the space, but the recent lockdown has really
Mhm.
forced us to just adopt that a little more. Right? It's the regulation along with the concern for the safety of our families, right? We don't want to step out because of what's going out there. So because of this chasm created between demand and supply, a lot of other players have also jumped in to fill the vacuum, right? So there are other brands and other businesses that have the delivery fleet and the infrastructure, but maybe they did not deal in this area specifically. So case in point, Swiggy is a popular food delivery app in India, and they've recently partnered with
Mhm.
certain FMCG brands to serve their users who need who need groceries delivered to them during these times. And also, Amazon and Flipkart have also stepped up their grocery. delivery came, and maybe deprioritized some of the other items that might not be essential at this point. Another thing
Hmm.
I've noticed, which was fairly mainstream in India, which is digital wallets, and that has really taken hold in some Southeast Asian countries, right? So when I speak to some of my friends who live over there, uh, up until a year or two ago, it was a very cash-driven economy, right? Now, because of social
True.
distancing and because of the way it's contactless payments, digital wallets have really taken hold in some of the Southeast Asian countries because cash is not something that's it's basically a carrier of germs, COVID or otherwise, right? So that's those are some of the trends that I've observed. Now, I want to look at a few companies, right? Based on these trends that are going on out there, how have some of the businesses that you work with pivoted or changed the way they engage customers or the way they do business in general?
Absolutely. So I give two examples here. So there's an e-commerce brand in Southeast Asia, one of the biggest online e-commerce players out there. It's Blibli.com. So what they've done is, as soon as COVID was out there, they basically created a specific marketing campaign where they kind of brought into the forefront that essential services is something that everybody would want, and they made it clear upfront in their communication as well as something that's available on the app. So as soon as you open the app, that's the first section that you would spot. And they also, in their communication, specified how they are taking measures at their end to make sure that all the items are sanitized and how they are actually being delivered to the users. So that was a very interesting campaign because they made sure that they were able to communicate what changes they are doing at their end, and also becoming in the forefront, letting users know that in case they would want any essential items, that they are available to go ahead and pick it up from there. Another interesting example that I saw was from Bukalapak.com. It's another e-commerce player out there. So what they did was, as soon as the news for COVID broke out, they created a specific section on the app where they started giving you information about what's happening around COVID across the world. Now, as a user, you would want to definitely understand what's the state of COVID, how is it spreading across, and you generally refer to the news. But what they did was they kind of became like the authority where people could just come to the app and get the information rather than the user searching multiple websites to get the information. That kind of became like a primary source. So that was another interesting example that I've seen. Have you observed any interesting examples as well, Sajeesh?
Sure. And then just to your point, that's really heartening to see a brand, take up giving updates to their users, right? With all the panicky, clickbaity articles going around, like people have enough things to worry about than fake news, right? So some of the things
Absolutely.
right. Some of the things that I've noticed, this is one other example in the Southeast Asian region as well. So Grab is one of the unicorns in Indonesia, right? And across the SCA nations. What they've done for their customers, first of all, is that they've included COVID-19 as an add-on for their riders' insurance coverage, but they have brought in some policies to help their partners out, right? Now these are drivers, delivery partners, and even merchants, right? So they've provided health insurance for these partners, which is paramount at this time, and also anyone who gets tested COVID-19 positive, right? They're providing them with lump sum amounts to get them
Hmm.
treated, right? They're also helping keep their merchants stay afloat during this time, because let's face it, you could think that it's important for their business because at the end of the day it's a network economy, and once we emerge at the end of this storm, we would they would need their partners to be with them and to be strong, right? But there is a business strategy angle to it, perhaps, but what something like this does is this gesture sort of builds trust and loyalty with their partners. So if let's say another player comes up, these partners would still stay loyal to Grab because of all the things that they did for them in these difficult times, right? And also merchants who are having a hard time sustaining and maybe are not on the platform, are being reached out to by the Grab team, and they helping them get on the platform, and they helping them with digital marketing and digital customer engagement skills to get them up to
Mm-hmm.
speed, and maybe serve their users digitally and deliver their products rather than just closing down business during this time, right? So and that's been reciprocated beautifully by the drivers, right? The drivers from Grab have volunteered to ferry healthcare professionals back in from hospitals. So these professionals spend their entire day, put their heart and soul into doing something that's taxing, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, with all the chaos going around. So at the end of the day, the last thing they need is to try and find a ride home, right? So the drivers are pitching in,
Absolutely.
and Grab is using its own technology to match drivers with healthcare professionals, and the drivers are happy because, like, even if they help them get half an hour more of rest at night, they come to work a lot more refreshed, and that's how, like, this one brand is helping its partners. The partners are helping medical professionals, who in turn are helping the society try and get back to normal. So this beautiful collaboration of the entire community is was a very fascinating story when I came across it. So another thing, again, closer to
Quite
home,
interesting. Quite interesting.
right? And there are
Yeah,
businesses
Sajeesh,
on
go
the
ahead.
other end of the spectrum as well, right? Grab, being a super app, and being backed by SoftBank, has the finances to sustain their partners during this time, right? But travel and hospitality is the sector that's been hit probably the worst, along with aviation, right? And Oyo is no exception to this. Their booking rates have dropped 50 to 60% in this quarter, and they have also been doing something that's really good to see, right? They have the rooms, the infrastructure. They're utilizing that to provide accommodation to healthcare professionals, right? They are taking care of this sanitation, and they're making sure that they're that the rooms are completely germ free, and also they partnered up with the hospital chain in India called Apollo, uh, to also provide beds to COVID-19 patients, which is good to see. And back in the day when the travel ban was announced, uh, people who were in the middle of a trip, maybe were stranded away from home in a foreign country or a foreign city, Oyo has also provided accommodation to them at affordable costs, rather than taking advantage of their situation. So, which was another thing that was sort of builds trust with their consumer base, and these are things that build relationships that last, right? Now,
Quite interesting. Quite interesting.
a lot of these stories are really good to hear, and particularly Oyo, right, who's bearing the brunt of the ban on travel, and they're still, like, trying to come up and do things that are helping the society. Now, as we proceed, I would like our viewers to remember that you can post questions in the comments. You just continue to do so, and we'll be addressing them in the end. Just a reminder. So now, Abhilash, from talking about strategic initiatives, I would want to zoom in and talk about some of the tactics, right? So what are some of the things that marketing teams, especially marketing teams of consumer businesses, can follow to sort of stay updated with the trends before they become commonplace? And also, what are some of the engagement tactics that they can start?
Absolutely, Sajesh. It's very interesting to see what you mentioned with the examples of Grab and Oyo, how the entire community is coming together and helping each other out. For marketers at this point, what they can particularly rely on, because there's uncertainty. You don't really know, because there's no blueprint for how exactly the COVID is going to pan out, and this has never happened before as well. So the best thing marketers can do right now is rely on data and utilize that to basically inform themselves of evolving trends. I'll quickly take you through like an example of a brand, of an e-commerce brand that did an experiment a couple of months ago. So you would have read, I'm sure the audience would have read that a number of notifications users receive are generally 2 to 3 in a day. But this particular brand wanted to challenge that. They wanted to see what can be the sweet spot for them. So when they did this entire analysis, you'd notice that they wanted to see how many people receive what number of notifications, and they wanted to push that number to see if that actually has any correlation with how users are engaging, or it has any correlation with uninstalls. The surprising thing from this entire story was that the sweet spot that they found was around 7 notifications. Now, this is particularly high for a brand where in a day you have so many notifications sent to a user. People would consider that it might be annoying, but the good part here was that all of these notifications are highly personalized. And since it's a super app, there are so many modules where people can get information. Helped users. It kind of helped keep the users informed of what information is actually being shared with them. So this was particularly interesting, where they found their sweet spot to be around 7 notifications. And they went on with that for quite some time and they saw really good results. But now, again, because of COVID, this entire thing has again shaken. And they again had to go back to the drawing board and look at data and see what exactly are trends that they need to optimize now. Now, here, I'd like to break it down instead of industries. I'd just like to break it down into 3 simple aspects. That is acquisition, engagement, and retention. So most brands out there, no matter which industry they are in right now, they're kind of focusing only on engagement and retention, because acquisition right now is kind of taking care of itself, because people have a need of signing up for an e-commerce platform to get stuff delivered to their place, or they're discovering it for the first time. So the acquisition part is something that marketers are not focusing on right now, and most of them are looking at engaging and retaining their existing audience. Now, there are few interesting ways of how brands can look at this. All their campaigns that they've structured, they need to focus more on engaging and retaining these users. Now, few automations can be put in place where if a user breaches a certain period of time where they've not engaged with the user, then some kind of communication goes out to them. Now, the more personalized this communication is, the better it is to actually get your retention up. Uh, Another interesting trend that I've noticed is that marketers are now looking at hooks within the app to get users to kind of engage with them. Like as I gave you examples earlier, like Bukala Park used the news section to keep users informed, and in Southeast Asia, in particular, there's also a layer of gamification. So as soon as you go to an e-commerce app, it's not just your transactions. There's a high level of gamification as well, which keeps you hooked to the app. So right now, I think that both brands are focusing on getting users hooked to the app, so that eventually, as the COVID situation becomes better, users are able to get a broader variety of products delivered, and they're able to go ahead and complete their transactions. Another another way of looking at data in a high level is that you'd notice that I read this in a recent article where all of a sudden the number of PS4 consoles that are being sold have suddenly risen. So this is something that a marketer wouldn't know is going to happen. So only when you look at data and you see what kind of products or what kind of categories are actually working out is when you'll be able to realize that, okay, this is a trend and you should probably capitalize on it. Yes, Anish.
That makes a lot of sense. I love what you mentioned about focusing focusing on engagement and retention, because for super apps and for even grocery delivery apps, things that are essential now, I noticed that brand loyalty has been difficult to win at these times, because people are opening up multiple apps and they're looking at whatever's available and they're just ordering that, right? So with all
True.
in this case grocery delivery apps as well, there is not no one particular app that people are staying loyal to. So one thing that marketers and product managers of these apps can do is build in maybe gamification and build in certain engagement tactics to hook them and keep them coming back for more even after this hard time passes, right? So that's an interesting thing. But uh, if you were to look at, or if you were to sort of factor in what data points to look at, right? Because we literally collect millions of events that users are doing, right? And how would you know where to start, basically?
Sure. So a good way of looking at this is relying on existing data where you have your users going ahead and making purchases. So a good way for you to start is basically trying to understand user journeys or user paths of what exactly are they navigating through to actually go ahead and complete the purchase. Now, when you look at this trend over a period of time, you'll notice some trends that what sections are popular, what kind of products are people viewing, and how are they transacting organically. You could then utilize those learnings in your campaigns to kind of engage an audience which is not very active at this point, and give them a hint saying that, okay, we see normal users transacting from these categories, and kind of push that message across to the users so that they are able to go ahead and convert. So that's one part of it. The second part I'd say is also understanding how your categories are performing. Now, for e-commerce brands, there are multiple verticals out there. Like any business, in fact, like if they have multiple, the app doesn't serve just one purpose. There are always two or three key factors that are in place. Like a payments app would be you need to transact. For an e-commerce brand, it might be discovering something new. So, understanding these triggers and figuring out what are the top factors, what is actually selling, and what is something that you see high engagement on. So that kind of becomes your leading indicator that this is a category that can gather some steam. You could probably utilize that in some of your campaigns and see how it works. So I think the best way to look at it is first look at your existing data, figure out some patterns from there, utilize those in your campaigns, kind of experiment, do like A/B tests, see what works for you, and based on what works, double down on that. What doesn't work, kind of relook at data. You keep reiterating this process so that you're able to go ahead and convert your users eventually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Looking at quantitative information maybe might get overwhelming, right, with the amounts of data that we are collecting these days. But if you look at it qualitatively to begin with, and look at user paths, and try to understand what most of your users are doing either before they make a purchase, whether they're jumping from category to category, or whether especially during this time, they know what they're looking for, they search for it, they find it, they order it. Or you could take the other approach where you're looking at what users are doing right after opening the app, right? So essentially the entry event is app opens, and then you're trying to analyze how many users are doing what. Like maybe people are
Exactly.
opening the app on a daily basis to check out the news and updates, such as what Bukalapak is doing. And that would give you a good sense of where the trend is going, and also give you a sense of what you need to do, right? So essentially you would look at the data, run certain experiments, then go back to the data to see whether that's working or not. So yeah, I really like the combination of the combination of qualitative and quantitative insights to get a better understanding of what's happening with your user base and where the consumer behavior is going. That's great.
Absolutely.
we're at the 25-minute mark. I noticed that there are some comments coming in. Uh, let's start taking the questions in a minute. I would like to thank you for joining me here, Abhilash, and then it was fun talking to you about. We covered a lot of ground, right, in the 25 minutes. We spoke about
Absolutely.
initiatives on a strategic level and things that marketers can do, look at data, and also like within the product, some of the experiments that you can conduct, right? So, one of the questions that we see here, there is
Hmm.
okay. So there is a COVID-19 report that's come out. So that was a link over here, not a question per se.
Okay.
And over on this side, I got a
I
question.
think in case,
I'm sorry, go on.
yeah, go ahead, Sajeesh.
So I
Yeah, I was saying in case the audience has any questions, please feel
um,
free to add them in the comments. Yeah.
right, right. I'm sorry. I think there is a lag. We keep uh,
Okay.
right. So yeah. In case you have any questions, just feel free to ask them in the comment section. And uh, over here, I noticed one about the travel and hospitality industry. Right. As we discussed, that's been one industry that's been really badly hit. So, what are some of the strategies that you've seen marketers try out in the travel section specifically to engage their customers?
Okay. So in travel, I think right now people are not focusing on transactions. They're kind of focusing on informing users of what's happening across the industry. So I think I saw a few interesting campaigns where brands kind of uh, went into nostalgia, where they didn't actually want you to purchase any travel trips in the future. They kind of went back and told you that, okay, your last trip was at this point. Can you share a memory of what you did there? So kind of creating a bond with the users where they understand what exactly, why did users transact earlier, and kind of create a connect with them, so that in the future, when the users are actually able to transact, they kind of are engaging with the platform and they continue transacting. I think that broadly the travel industry is going to take some time to get back, but I think most of the brands have kind of switched their entire persona where they're kind of becoming more open to customer interaction and kind of behaving more like your close friends.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's very true, right? The travel industry, as such, might not get back to normal in the foreseeable future, right? Even with the travel bans being lifted gradually, even if they are lifted across the world, I think people would be wary of traveling to certain areas and traveling in general, and also being in crowded spaces with close proximity, right? One of the other things that I noticed somewhere where travel and hospitality businesses can actually encourage local travel, right? So essentially, international travel might take a hit. You would fly less, but there are places that you could just drive to and spend the weekend. And that's something that travel apps can encourage people to do more of. There are a lot of beautiful places around where we live and in drivable distances. So I think that's also one of the things that can be encouraged, and that could be the new travel, right? So like Oyo CEO once said that Goa might become the new Miami, and Coorg might become the new Switzerland, right? So since there are no other questions, we would just wrap it up here. But if you have any questions about your industry in particular, and uh, you want to know how to engage customers and how to change your approach, you can feel free to reach out to either Abhilash or me. And if you'd like
Sure.
to if you'd like to get a report, get the COVID-19 report that we published, and which professionals all over the globe who are responsible for customer engagement have been referring to lately, it's the link is in the comments. You can go there, download the report, and get a sense of where your industry stands with respect to the quadrant. Right now, it's based on a number of new usages, new daily active users, and also the number of downloads, right? So, on a spectrum of travel and hospitality to video conferencing, it covers a lot of industries, and it tells you certain stories of businesses within those industries and how they are handling this change as well. So, do check it out, and you can download it through the link in the description. So that was it from our end. Abhilash, thanks a lot for doing this, for joining us here and sharing your insights that you found out.
Absolutely, Sajeesh. Absolutely. I think there's one question here from Suraj. Just before we wrap up, Suraj says, what unique strategies e-commerce companies are using to convert the first time or new e-commerce users into long-term users? So yeah, Suraj, you're right. Like a lot of new users are coming in. So a few strategies that companies are like what I've seen people are doing is kind of informing users about products that are available. Like your main motivation to sign up on an e-commerce platform would be to probably buy a product, but there are many other verticals that e-commerce companies are into as well, and users might not discover this on their own. So one key factor is kind of making sure that users are informed about what products are available, and and brands basically communicate that to those users. That's one strategy that I've seen works really well. Another thing is personalizing the communication based on user behavior. Like this is something that is very powerful, and when used in the right way, it can create a really good engagement hook. So brands should definitely look at doing that as well.
Absolutely. So understanding different user segments and how they are behaving differently and what they were doing perhaps until last month and they're not doing now, or vice versa, would give you a good sense of where the trend is going, and then how you need to experiment and engage the larger segment, right? Based on maybe a smaller subset of those users. Makes a lot of sense. Uh, just checking to see. Well, we don't have any more questions coming in. Like I mentioned, you can reach out to either of us if you have any questions. And I hope it was as much fun for our viewers as it was for me personally, and I'm sure it was for you as well. Uh, and that you got to learn something that you can probably go back to your workplace and apply in practice as well. So, with that, I would like to thank you, Abhilash, and thank all of the viewers for joining in today. We'll see you
Thanks for having me,
with,
Sajeev.
and we'll see you in the next episode of Breaking New Ground next week. So follow the page on LinkedIn to stay updated with that, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Awesome.